Here's an example of a homework problem where you're graphing a piecewise function. This problem came straight out of the homework. Multiple choice actually makes these problems a lot easier, but I want to solve this problem as if we're just graphing by hand. The first thing I notice about the piecewise function is that the rule for the function changes when x equals 2. We have one expression, negative 1/2 x squared plus 2, for the x values that are less than or equal to 2. And we have another rule, 1/2 x, when x is greater than 2. So the graph is going to change when x equals 2 right here. So I'm going to draw a little dotted line, and actually let me use a different color. And I'm using a writing tablet that does not work as well as I wish it did, so I apologize if my writing's a little shaky here. I've drawn a dotted line through x equals 2, and I want to point out that, all right, on one side of the dotted line we have the x values that are less than 2. I'm actually going to write less than or equal to 2 so that it corresponds to this section of the piecewise function. So for x values less than or equal to 2, the rule is y. Our instructions for how to find y are right here. Negative 1/2 x squared plus 2. I'd like to also make a note here that the shape of that graph is a parabola. We notice that this has degree 2, so we know for sure the graph is a parabola, and the negative in front tells us that the parabola opens downward. So just up here where there's room, I guess I'm going to write parabola, and maybe a little upside down parabola here, just a little sketch. Right now I'm just setting up a blueprint for the graph. I'm just sort of figuring out the layout here. On the right side of the dotted line, we have the x values that are greater than 2. And so the rule, according to this piecewise function, for x values greater than 2 is that y equals 1/2 x. Now that equation has degree 1. Our highest power of x is x to the first power. So that's a linear equation. The graph is going to be a line. Let's draw a little line off to the side here as a reminder. Okay, so there's our blueprint. This half of the graph should have the shape of a parabola. This half of the graph should have the shape of a line. Now I want to plot some specific points to get the graph. And you don't really have to understand the overall shape to begin with. We can just plug in individual x values. It's nice if you have an idea what shape you're supposed to get. But we could just plug in anything less than 2, so say x equals 0. If I plug x equals 0 into this equation, I'll have negative 1/2 times 0 squared, which is 0, plus 2. So my y value is 2 when x is 0. I'll plug in a couple more. Before I plug in another point, let me point out that we should graph a parabola that goes all the way up to where x equals 2. We have a parabola for all x values less than or equal to 2. So the next x value I'd like to plug in, and let me come over here to do my scratch work. If x equals 2, then y equals negative 1/2 times 2 squared plus 2. And again, yeah, I'm sorry for my writing. I have to look at the screen while I'm writing on a template off to the side, so it's a little bit tricky here. Negative 1/2 times 4 plus 2. Well, negative 1/2 times 4, that's negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2 plus 2, which is 0. So when x is 2, my y value is 0 right here. Now, it's nice if you know, okay, parabolas are symmetric across the y-axis, so I'm also going to have a point here at negative 2, 0. If you're not sure about that, you can plug in just any other x value less than 2. I like the even numbers just because then when I multiply by that 1/2, I get a whole number and not a fraction. So when an x equals negative 2, y equals negative 1/2 times negative 2 squared plus 2, which again is negative 1/2 times 4 plus 2. And we already did the arithmetic on that. We know that comes out to 0. So the y value is 0 right here. And I'm going to go ahead and sketch a parabola from there. And it's going to be messy. But again, your homework here is multiple choice, so this is more than enough to help you choose the right graph in your homework. Okay, now we just need the right half of the graph for the x values greater than 2. So the equation that we use to find our corresponding y values is here, y equals 1/2 x. Here again, this is the graph for all x values greater than 2. A lot of students make the mistake of, okay, so they'll start their graph with 3. Now, if x equals 3, then y equals 1/2 times 3, so 3 over 2, which is 1.5. And so they'll graph this. And they'll have the graph extending from there. So they might also plug in 4. X is 4, y is 1/2 times 4, which is 2. So they'll plot this point, and they'll just draw a line extending from there. The problem with that is, say 2.5 is also greater than 2. So we actually want to, the line here should go all the way back to where x equals 2. And then the way we show that this is for x values strictly greater than 2 is we draw an open circle here. And again, I'm sorry, that's really